Welcome to Medley and ICD10. As I'm sure you know, October 1st this year, we're changing to a new diagnosis coding system and leaving behind the ICD9s we've used for decades. Well, for the most part. There are some exceptions in that workers' comp plans and auto liability type policies are still going to be taking ICD9s rather than ICD10. So this is going to be a complex change that affects every aspect of the way your practice does business. And we're here today to show you how Medley makes your life as easy as possible. If we look at the change by practice type, we've selected a few specialties here and show you how many ICD-9 codes they typically use versus how many ICD-10 codes they will typically be using in the same scenarios. So you can see cardiology, dermatology, 2.5 times the number of codes, 3.5 times the number of codes. And if you go down the list to the bottom, you'll see orthopedics. Typically under ICD-9 use about 143 different diagnosis codes. In ICD-10 there's 5,843. That's almost a 41 times increase in the number of codes that you'll have to use to do the same job under ICD-10. If you look at it by condition, tobacco abuse, there's a single ICD-9 code, but there's 5 different ICD-10 codes. Diabetes, 10 ICD-9s, 318 ICD-10s. And a fracture of radius, 33 ICD-9 codes, 1,818 codes for a fracture of a radius. That's a 55 times increase just in the number of codes. And it's not just more codes, but they're more complex, and you're expected to code these differently. For example, a lumbar sprain and strain, ICD-9, one simple code, 847.2. Under ICD-10, you've got a main code of S33-5XXA, just rolls off the tongue, which covers the sprain of ligaments, lumbar sprain, and its initial encounter. But you are also expected to code associated open wounds, ruptures, displacements of the discs, obstetric damage to the pelvic joints, dislocations and sprains of the joints and ligaments of the hip, strain of muscles and lower back, and on the S33 code you also must include the proper 7th character to indicate if this is an initial encounter, subsequent encounter, or a sequela. So we've moved from a single code to a set of codes to describe a condition more completely. Another example, or this one's from pediatrics, a good ear infection. ICD-9, basically for acute otitis externa, 380.22. Under ICD-10 you have a whole family of these codes that specifies more distinctly what type of infection this is. And you see the list here. We've got a group of codes, and these happen to be all unspecified. Those are not recommended to use, but each of those codes has a right, left, and bilateral version, which really is the choice that you should make. So when you see these codes that end in 1, it means the right ear. When in 2, it means the left ear, and when it's 3, it's bilateral. And that covers all codes. If the 1, 2, and 3 in that last digit always indicates laterality. Finally, how do we match an ICD-9 to an ICD-10? How do we find, if we're comfortable with an ICD-9 code we've used for years, what is the comparable ICD-10, and how are we going to be able to locate that code? You see here there's almost 70,000 diagnosis codes in ICD-10. That's versus about 13,000 codes in ICD-9. Of those codes, 24% of ICD-9s have a 1-to-1 exact match in ICD-10. And you see in the chart, some codes in ICD-9, 3% basically, don't have any match for ICD-10, which means the coding structure is completely different for that condition. You also have nearly 50% of ICD-9s that have a 1-to-1 approximate match in ICD-10. The approximate match means that this is the closest ICD-10 code that's considered a match for that. You may still have to select additional codes to further specify the condition, or you may have to choose a completely different code if it doesn't fit exactly the situation with your patient. You also have 18% of the codes that have a 1-to-1 approximate match with multiple choices. In other words, the GEMS database that provides these cross-matching between ICD-9 and 10 says that you need, for those 18% of ICD-9 codes, you'll need to select one of several choices depending on the scenario for your patient. And speaking of scenarios, 2% of the ICD-9 codes come with just a single scenario. Scenarios are groups of codes or groups of lists of codes that need to be used together to be the equivalent of a given ICD-9 code. And you see finally 2.9% of the ICD-9 codes have a one-to-many match with multiple scenarios. So when you have multiple scenarios, you may have multiple lists of codes within a scenario. So when you're coding from ICD-9 to 10, you would choose one of the scenarios that's most appropriate for your patient's situation. Then if that scenario has multiple lists, you choose one item from each of the lists under that scenario. So it can get quite complex, and while 49% do have an approximate match and 24% have an exact match, it's the remainder of those. Basically a quarter of your ICD-9 codes are going to be in a complex matching situation where you're absolutely required to choose multiple ICD-10s to be the equivalent of your ICD-9. Let's look at a super bill. This is an example from a family practice. We've got various diagnosis sections for the things that a family practitioner typically sees in their practice. You see, for instance, infectious diseases. We have 6 ICD-9s typically today. That's 25 ICD-10 codes to be the equivalent of those. Some don't change a whole lot. Neoplasms, 2 to 2. Endocrine metabolic disorders, 6 to 6. No big deal. Look at nervous system. 7 ICD-9s, 45 ICD-10s. Circulatory, 11 ICD-9s, 42 ICD-10s. Musculoskeletal and connective tissue, 43 ICD-9 codes becomes 457 ICD-10s. And it continues. You see injuries and adverse effects, 12 ICD-9 codes, 272 ICD-10s. So the bottom line here is that your current super bill with that block of ICD-9s printed on it in little bitty type has about 164 in this case for a family practice example. The equivalent codes in ICD-10 are over 1,000 codes. So your one-page super bill with those 164 ICD-9s becomes an 8-page super bill with ICD-10s. That's just too much paper, too many things to flow through, and you just can't do it with paper anymore. Medley has done several things to make this transition easy, to make it easier for you to work day to day and do your business using ICD-10s and ICD-9s as needed. One of our main features is the smart switch between ICD-9 and ICD-10. Based on the cutover date set in your insurance company and the date of service that you're entering on a billing, the billing window automatically switches between ICD-9 codes and ICD-10 without any user intervention. So your staff doesn't need to have a cheat sheet or a list of these insurances are still on ICD-9 while everybody else is on ICD-10. The system understands that, switches the codes automatically so they're using the correct codes every time. We also include full GEMS tools, basically to convert and search to find the appropriate ICD-10s from a given ICD-9 code, and we can do it in the other direction as well to find equivalent ICD-9s from a given ICD-10 code. These GEMS tools are designed to be open with your billing entry window and allow you, once you've selected the appropriate codes in the GEMS tool, with a couple of clicks you can copy and paste those directly into the billing you're working on. Finally, we always include all code updates. Whenever diagnosis code changes are made, as well as procedure codes and other medical policies and things, those are included under your software assurance, and they're always timely and accurate. When those code lists are published, we put them in the next build available for you, and with a simple download you can update your system to be correct and current. If you've got an EMR system, Medley accommodates that as well. We've got built-in Hl7 integration that can work with any EMR that uses the Hl7 communication standard. This includes web-based EMRs and EMRs installed locally in your office. We can communicate through all those scenarios. We also offer EMR integration using the Xlink software, which is a popular middleware program to connect EMRs and practice management systems. We can send or receive patient demographics from your EMR, and we send scheduling information from the Medley appointment scheduler to the EMR system. And finally, we receive the charges from the EMR and bring those into Medley so you can enter those billings without any further data entry. What about if you don't have an EMR? We can accommodate that too. We have an electronic superbill function built into Medley. It uses easy to maintain templates that allow you to group common sets of procedures, diagnosis codes, patient orders, as well as actions for your staff. It also has the smart switch technology, so the superbill, just like entering a billing, switches between ICD9 and ICD10 based on the insurance company and the data service for the charges you're entering. It includes an integrated word processor to build patient orders that you can customize and put in merge fields to customize those for your patients. So they're not generic orders, but they're specific orders with the patient's name, patient information, provider information. Any of those things can be automatically included in those documents when they're printed for your patients. And of course, an electronic superbill posts directly into Medley to create billing charges without any extra data entry. So let's see how this works in Medley. First, let's talk about the smart switch technology in the billing entry window. If we select a patient and click New Billing, the billing entry window opens, and you see in this instance, this patient's insurance is already accepting ICD-10s. So ICD-10 code lists are automatically selected in the window. If we change to a patient whose insurance is not accepting ICD-10s, you'll see the window automatically switches back to the ICD-9 codes. Finally, we can use our GEMS tool to look up ICD-10 codes based on existing ICD-9s. So if we switch to our GEMS tools window, we have several ways to search and find the diagnosis codes we're seeking. We can type in the number of the code, and the system matches as we type. Hit enter, and it shows us the corresponding ICD-10s. We can do the same type of search based on the description as well. Finally, we have full text search available. Any words or characters we type in the full text search box and then hit enter will be located anywhere in the description or code of the ICD-9. So it's quick and easy to find the appropriate codes, and then once you've located the codes you want, we make it easy to put them into your billing. For instance, we found 819.0, fracture of the arm. You see here this ICD-10 code has at least 2 scenarios and multiple lists, which means we need to select one from each list. Once we've done that, hit the copy button. Those ICD-10 codes are automatically available in our billing window. Simply hit paste diagnosis, and we can choose whether we want to add those codes to our existing billing, or we could replace them completely with the codes we had selected. That quick and easy, you can switch back and forth between ICD-10s and ICD-9s, and the GEMS tool gives you a way to look up the appropriate codes as you need. Next, let's look at superbills. Generally, these are run from the appointment scheduler. You select an appointment and click New Superbill. The superbill window opens with that patient and case already selected, as well as the visit template that was specified on the visit reason in the scheduler. The superbill window gives us an easy way to drag and drop diagnosis and procedure codes to indicate what occurred during this patient visit. And you notice again, this has ICD-10 codes because this patient is set to use ICD-10s based on their insurance. We can also drag and drop orders into the order section, as well as actions for our staff to take into the action section. Save this superbill, and then we can print the orders for our patient. These orders are completely customized in Medley with a full word processor built into the system. They include the ability to insert things such as the provider's name, patient information, or any other information related to that superbill. These instructions can include graphics, as well as any type of formatting you'd find in a word processor. Save this superbill, and just that quick, it's ready to be passed into your billing system without any further data entry. And you see again, if we select a patient who's not using ICD10s and hit New Superbill, our template is again selected automatically, but this time we're showing ICD9 codes rather than ICD10s. So just that quick and easy, Medley gives you ways to work with one or both sets of codes, as well as tools to find them as you need to based on other information, the ICD9 code, the description, any words you may have in the diagnosis description, and it makes this switch automatically so your staff doesn't have to manually change between ICD9s and ICD10s during this transition period.